Hey everyone, welcome to week 80. Today's day 3, Wednesday. This is our third day of our ongoing Against week. Remember, what we're fighting against is our painting instincts. Let's see how we do. Okay, let's get started. This is day 3. This is our third day of our ongoing Against week. And I guess the title for the week may have conditioned the subject matter that I wanted to paint for today's painting, because throughout these days, what I've been trying to do is to battle against my instincts, to try to go to the other direction of where my instinct is telling me to go to. So, for example, on Monday, I'm a painter that prides himself in being very respectful of value. Value to me is of the utmost importance. I think that if you speak with painters that are trained in a naturalist tradition, the painting that we end up doing can vary tremendously. But if our origins are seated in naturalism, and if we were educated painting from life, for example, and drawing from life, chances are that value is one of those quintessential blocks that we use to construct our painting. It is that fundamental and it is that important to the makeup of our painting. So on Monday, I just disturbed a tiny bit those value relationships. It was seemingly one tiny change, but it was a change that cascaded into a ton of relationships just not working and not being activated throughout the painting. So I think that even though this is something that I've recognized about value during the years, Monday's painting was really important for me in the sense that it cemented how important value relationships are for the construction of a painting. A painting is made up of tons of moving gears, and if you take one of those gears out of the painting, the mechanics of the painting fall apart. It just doesn't work. So I had a real blast just extracting one of those gears, a very important gear, in terms of the elements that were hierarchical in that painting, because I took out my lightest and brightest light, and it was a light that was making possible a lot of the other relationships that were in the painting. I described it on Monday's painting as the cause of the painting, and almost everything else was just the effect. So taking out the origin, that brightest moment of light in a painting, and replacing it with a completely arbitrary value and with such high saturation was very, very strange, very weird. It is simple, but it's certainly not something that I usually do with my paintings. What I try to do when I alter value relationships is something much, much more simple, which is compressing my value range. But you never have to do anything to a specific area of a painting that is so out of whack like I did on Monday. So that was a new thing for me. Again, super, super simple, but it was certainly a new experience for me, and I really appreciated it. On Tuesday, I was saying how if viewed from the optics of trying to execute an exercise that made sense for this week's challenges, then the painting is probably a failure. And I'll try to explain very quickly why. I had offset value on Monday, and I wanted to offset color on Tuesday. So the way that I understand color, the use that I feel most comfortable with when I'm dealing with color, is one that has to be born from the idea of wholeness. So I'll give you an example. If I say, oh wow, that feels green, my brain won't really say green. My brain is trained to say, oh wow, that feels greener than this other area. So it's always going to be relative to some other area of the painting. It's always going to be about comparing. That way, I never disassociate a color from another area of color that's within my painting. It's always about relationships. And because my brain is so trained to just look for relationships all the time, constantly, the idea of wholeness is super important for me. The idea of understanding the essential qualities of what I'm looking at, and to be able to describe something that is complicated by simplifying the elements that I recognize in the image. So again, to me, the idea of wholeness, of oneness, has to do with unity. And every time I think of color breaking up, I'm always horrified of those things because I feel that the unity is compromised. So anything that compromises the integrity of my painting, I run the other way. I'm absolutely horrified of those things. I think that those things are traps, and I very rarely put myself in harm's way because I know that I'm a painter that's not going to feel comfortable trying to deal with so many color decisions in this case that we're trying to break up color. And there's a high probability that I'm not going to be able to control my painting and it's just going to fall apart or it's going to become super disjointed. So the idea for yesterday's painting was to tell myself, you know what? There's not going to be an underdrawing. You're going to start by reacting to the hue that's there, and you're going to exaggerate those hues. And if you want the saturation, even though I have a natural tendency to desaturate things, but I told myself you're going to react to the hue, maybe saturate a little bit more of those colors, and try to take singular decisions. They don't have to be absolutely definitive. You can go over those decisions, but try to make them as committed as you can and try to not paint over them as much as you would when you are modeling form, when you're developing form in some of your regular paintings. That's what I told myself. So it was a really nice starting point because I thought, okay, this is going to be super threatening to me. I'm not used to painting this way. I am certainly not at all used to breaking the concept of wholeness. If I'm going to see all these free-floating masses of color, decisions of color just dispersed through my painting, I'm going to have a panic attack. And it's going to be cool to see if I'm capable of configuring a painting by the end. And what I noticed yesterday was that even though there was an absolute willingness, this rational willingness from my part to try and break up the painting, and I saw myself looking for those colors in the palette and trying to be respectful to those singular committed decisions, even though I tried to do it, there is a subconscious, and I was talking about this yesterday, level of control that we exercise in our painting, which is fascinating to me. So even though you want to let go, even though you want to, not literally, but figuratively, you want to harm your painting, you want to make things difficult for yourself, it's almost like that sparks a subconscious response where your brain is saying, okay, I'm not going to let you do something completely out of control. I'm going to always exercise control, even if it's at a level where you're not completely aware of it. And I thought that was incredible. So that's why I describe the painting as a failure, but it's not a failure. I mean, as a painting, I think it's a really nice painting. And I left it at a stage where I was like, oh my God, that's Fer. Fer's essence is there. I have nothing else to do. I could just keep plopping color on top of this painting, but it makes no sense because my hope was that this exercise was going to deconstruct the idea of Fer. And what ended up happening was that I sadly, from an almost subconscious level, I was taking control of those decisions, even if they are foreign to me, even if that's not the way I naturally paint. My brain was like in warning mode. I could sense like this red light just going on inside my brain saying like, okay, we have to take control of this. We can't just let this painting fall apart. So at the end, when I looked at the painting, I was like, oh, that's a really nice painting of Fer. It's not what I had set out to do, but it's the painting that happened. At some point, I was like, I just want to put like a light yellow green on top of everything and start over again and see what happens. But I told myself, no, that's just forcing yourself almost like artificially and pushing, trying to take the painting somewhere else and then piecing everything back together and giving form to this painting once again. But at the end, I told myself, you know what? Just leave it. Leave it, because it is a painting that reminds you that there is a separate level of control that really is this instinctual control that we've been trying to fight against, and it lies way beneath the surface. I mean, I thought that this was something that we could easily access, and the truth is, it's not as easy as I thought it was. It never is. This is actually super, super complicated. And that's why when we say things like, oh, I'm going to try to unlearn what I learned at school, for example, at art school. I mean, your heart and your mind can be in the right place, and you can try to push your painting so that you put to test everything that you've been taught. But sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes those experiences and the lessons that you've collected are so embedded within your own sensibility and within your brain that it's just very hard to access those things. I think that this is certainly not something that we could do in a 4-painting week. This is probably something that takes months or even years to try and achieve. And I would think it takes dozens upon dozens of paintings to be able to purge yourself from all that information, because
at some point you did consider that information useful. Your body remembers it as something that was essential for your growth. So I think that your brain and your emotions, your sensibility protect those things. So very hard, very, very hard to access those things. And that's why I loved yesterday's painting. So it may have been a miss in terms of what I was trying to do thematically for the week, but I think it's an absolute win in the sense of the lesson that it taught me. I think it was amazing. Today's painting is a little bit different because, to recap, we've gone against value on Monday. We went against color and unity yesterday. And for today, I wanted to go against form. Now, this one is a tough one for me. It's kind of hard to explain because deep down, I love the classical construction of form. I love how things look in nature. I think nature is perfect because it just simply is. And for example, when I look at a body, if I'm working with a model, any body type, it doesn't matter. Every time I see a gesture of a human body, this miracle of mechanics, I'm just in awe, and I try to celebrate it as faithfully as I can through painting. That's always my aim. But the thing is, with the pass of time, I've noticed that I not only want to celebrate what I'm looking at, but I also want to inject it with the manner in which I observe it, with my own perception, because my perception speaks about everything that has shaped me as a human being. So I find it incredibly interesting if that character can be part of the essence of my painting. What that usually means is that I exaggerate things. I have a very easy way of understanding hierarchies in my painting, which is that if something moves me, if a moment of the body moves me, then I tend to exaggerate it just to let myself know, and obviously to also let the observer know that this particular moment was something that I found fascinating. This is not rocket science. This is very simple. If I see something that I like, I'm going to use everything I know about painting to try and put a spotlight on those instances. So because I've been doing that for years now, there is a natural distortion to that manner of constructing form. Because you are exaggerating certain things, there's a ton of misproportion. So even though I adore the classical sense of understanding, conceiving, and depicting, for example, the human body, I know that my path has taken me to try and push that way in which I understand the human body. So when I told myself, let's try to push form today, I was very interested in seeing what I could come up with if I told myself, just go against this naturalist impulse, go against this respect that you have for classical painting and push. I don't know, something weird happened because I think I feel very, very comfortable at both ends of this spectrum. I feel super comfortable when I have to be very disciplined, if I want to be very disciplined. And I also feel very, very comfortable if I have to push and distort the human form. So I noticed that even if there's a willingness on my part to say, you know what, I am going to push form, I rationally don't see what I could do in terms of pushing it that would make me feel super, super uncomfortable. This does not speak about my ability or my experience. This just speaks about me being okay with every manner of depicting form. And I'm not saying that what I'm doing today lies at the opposite end of the spectrum of a classical depiction of the human body. No, not at all. It is a painting that I think I needed to paint just to realize that this is something that is never going to harm me. Misproportions, distortions, the lack of structure in something, it's something that's never going to bother me. I've done a ton of these boxing paintings. I really, really enjoy them. Today, for example, I had to paint Jake LaMotta. The fights of Sugar Ray Robinson versus Jake LaMotta are legendary. They fought 6 times in their career, which is crazy. That rivalry is never, ever going to happen again. The way fights are promoted nowadays, the amount of fights that fighters fight nowadays is completely different. So this is something that's never going to happen in the future. At least it's highly improbable. But Sugar Ray Robinson only lost, I think by decision, one of the 6 fights, and Jake LaMotta could take a beating. He was a tough fighter. So even though I obviously acknowledge that Sugar Ray is one of the best fighters ever, I wanted to paint LaMotta. I think this pose is after a straight, so I just exaggerated the gesture. I curled him up. I made his body feel like a slinky. Again, I'm trying to put my painting in harm's way, and it's never going to happen. When I consider the possibilities of really pushing distortion, I think that excites me even more. I'm realizing that the object is this week. Yes, it is meant to be a week where I go against some of the fundamental values that I hold dear in my painting. But if I try to evaluate what has happened in these past 3 paintings, I'm noticing that some things can certainly threaten the integrity of my painting. And there's other things that I'm either going to be very protective of, or there are things like today that simply can't hurt my painting. I think I can push as much as I want, and I don't know if I'll ever feel uncomfortable in that sense. That's a very cool thing to learn from today's painting. If you would have asked me, I think I could have told you that that's what was going to happen. But I think one thing is to answer things because you think them to be true, and something completely different is to have an experience that teaches you that they are indeed true. So I think that that's a value in today's painting, and I loved it. Tomorrow I'm going to try to put some technical hurdles in my way, and I think I'm going to feel very uncomfortable. So if yesterday and today were circumstances that made paintings that I felt much more comfortable with, I think tomorrow's painting, I'm going to try to push a little bit to see if I can access that feeling of just being annoyed by a technical aspect in the construction of my painting. But that's going to be tomorrow. I'll see you guys. Love you. Bye.